Mcintosh.
Good morning, everyone. My job today is to really bring you up to date and talk a little bit about the UK market, which I think you'll probably see in the next few slides is actually quite a lot different from the American market. This is sort of my little agenda in terms of we'll look at market characteristics. We'll dip down a little into who the players are and what the types of consolidation has been and what may well be consolidation in the future. And then we'll kind of come back up and see what's happened to sales trends, what the impacts of consolidation have been, and kind of what's next, really. So this just outlines who the key players are in the UK at a publisher level. And as you can see, actually, a lot of them are really, really quite big players. I mean, the characteristic of the UK in the newsprint market is that we're a small island, and we've got 11 national papers running throughout the whole country with sort of regional variations. As you can see, the newspaper market splits over, very quickly to the magazine market, which, as you can see, its players, they're all pretty much a little smaller in size, but nevertheless, more of them, quite a proliferation of them, and still big and chunky in their own right. I've gone the wrong way. So this chart splits into two. The top bit just sort of brings out a bit more detail from some of the charts on the bottom. As you can see, we've got the newspaper market, which is pretty much the slide we had before. But the interesting characteristic in the UK is that the newspaper publisher will deal directly with the wholesaler. There's nothing else in the middle. However, if you look at the magazine market, it's then consolidated in the middle through a distributor, and there's really there's three main distributors in the UK, and then it comes into two wholesalers. So there's a separate guy. They've got really two primary roles. One is to deal with people like us, to deal with the logistics and the supply chain, and the other side is to deal with representation at retail. And this has broadly been what's happened to the underlying market in terms of number of titles. So over the last 5 years, actually magazine titles have actually grown, compound annual growth rate around just on 2%. So what we're seeing is an awful lot more smaller magazines. As many magazines, more and more magazines, but a lot smaller. As publishers sort of repurpose, recreate content, and obviously we have to then split that across an awful lot more customers to try and get the circulation levels. In terms of newspapers, believe it or not, in the so-called declining market, we've actually got one more over the last 5 years, the new entrant in a little product called I, which came in at a much lower cover price, and it's actually increasing circulation. And at the outlet level, actually over 5 years, we've only seen compound annual decline rates of just less than 0.4%. And the underlying characteristic here is actually all the big supermarkets, so in our case the Tesco's and the Sainsbury's, actually, you know what, they're going to the convenience outlets. And the first thing they want in any convenience outlet is they need the footfall generator of newspapers and magazines. So despite times of austerity, we're still dealing with broadly the same number of customers in the UK as we had 4 or 5 years ago. And this is obviously a depressing one. This is what's actually happened to sales. If you look at our PLC numbers, you'll actually see these are the real numbers. And what we have here is sort of two parts to this slide. The first part is the blue bar, which is the actual sales value, which as a wholesaler is critical for us because we're a percentage of cover price. So if you look at the newspaper one, you know what, that -2 to -4%, it's been there the last 5 years. And you know what, you can draw that chart back probably 10, 15, and it'll look broadly the same. So when it comes to percentage of cover price, it's been declining now for a long time. But look what's happened to the volumes in the last few years. They have now started to accelerate their kind of level of circulation reductions. And the issue for that is, and if you look at a publisher model just now, particularly in the UK, where you've got the price of paper going up, you've got ad rates coming down substantially, 9–10%, you've got everyone trying to go into the digital space, the only place they've left to go is to put the circulation revenue up, and we're seeing much more aggressive play in terms of circulation, in terms of the cover prices of each of the products. Magazines, however, is substantially different, and this slide really tells you that actually this year and the end of last year we've seen a steep decline in the magazine market, but principally at volume rate, because you can see the volumes and the actual value are broadly the same in the first 6 months. And really two things are underpinning that. Whilst we've seen lots of small new launches, we've seen a couple of really big closures. So something like Auto Trader, it's kind of no surprise that that product is now closed. It was, in the UK, it was a little bit of a classified, and guess what, it was eventually going to go digital at some point in time. But hey, the day it goes is still a pretty painful day for us. And the other thing that's happened is the celebrity sector has really been a turn-off in the UK. Yeah, baby George, Prince George, was a real help, but in actual fact, the UK consumers sort of turned off to celebrity to some extent. Obviously, austerity measures has been around, and we do have a little bit of a category killer in terms of the mail online, which is nothing like the Daily Mail as a product, for those of you who've been to the UK, but you can now get that as a website throughout the world, and that's much more taking all the celebrity activity out of our marketplace. So magazines for us is a much, much greater worry than the newspaper side. Now in the UK we do have a bit of a backdrop to regulatory change and the outcome of what's called the Levinson inquiry. And that's actually two things are about to happen to that. One is we have this week, about Wednesday I think, where certain bits of the UK government meet to decide which version do we like to ordain going forward. Are they going to ordain the one that they have recommended, or are they going to ordain the one that the press themselves have put forward? I know which side I'd like to be on, but until we get there we don't know. And the other thing that's going to underpin our market for the next few years is that the court cases underpinning the hacking scandal in the News of the World actually starts to go to court in October, and they're likely to go on until next March. So we're going to have a little bit of a regulatory overhang for the next 3 or 4 months. So yeah, there are big challenges as well. We've got some stats of the PPA that said this is not just restricted to our part of the business. If you look at the business-to-business media side as well, they're predicting the ad rates to go down 5%, and they're predicting the kind of paid-for ad rates still to go down quite substantially over the next few years. So hey, it's difficult times for everyone involved. So the next topic was to sort of look at what's happened in consolidation. I think we said earlier that the wholesale market's now a two-player market. And as you can see on this map, the blue and the green is where Menzies represents. And actually, not only have we consolidated in terms of the number of players, actually within our own estate, it has been all around getting supply chain efficiencies and reducing cost. So we have reduced roughly our depot network in terms of our major hubs for magazine packing down from 19 to 14, which has actually meant that broadly 80% of every single customer we have has actually faced some challenges in terms of us changing their delivery mechanism over the last few years. But not only that, we've had to try and diversify as well, because you cannot live with those sales declines and deliver city expectations at EBIT level without starting the diversification process. So we've started to move and using our assets to do things like trunking for publishers and so on. When we then go up the market a little and look at what else has been in terms of consolidation, I think Mike actually mentioned an event in the US that also happened in the UK. Obviously, Hearst bought Hachette, which not only did they buy the publishing rights, but they then changed the circulation solution when it moved from Market Force to Comag. And the other thing we just had recently is Frontline and Seymour, who are two of the bigger distributors, have kind of always been sisters and brothers for quite a while, but only recently they've started to really converge their ownership structure, which is all around getting back office savings out of their business as well. But it's not just at that level. If you kind of look a little bit wider, you can also see that Northern and Shell, which owns the Daily Express, the Daily Star and OK Magazine, they actually bought a TV company called Channel 5. So the consolidation isn't just restricted to the paper side, it's also about broadening the reach as well. So kind of we try to work it back and think, well, kind of roughly what's happened in the last 5 years. We worked out at least 54% of all titles or all kind of ownership structures have sort of changed or consolidated over the last 5 years. So there's been huge changes. So what's been the impact for the consumer? Do you know, from our perspective, we think that actually has been a pretty positive impact for the consumer, because we know that our structure only works by selling copies. So we have to work hard to make sure everyone continues to get a copy in the right place at the right time. Newspaper availability has grown dramatically over that period in time. But at the same time, you can't just keep cutting costs. We can't keep swinging axes and chopping people out. We have to invest as well to get much more efficiency. So whether it's in packing technology like we use Axon or HS, it's also about developing things where the digital really impacts us. So we've developed apps for our customers to use. And a kind of a loose stat here is that about this time last year, we had 50,000 calls to our 2 call centres every week. We've got 29,000 customers. So broadly, every customer phoning twice a week to change their orders, to check on their availability, to check on status and so on. Roll it on 12 months, and we get now less than 30,000. So actually, investing in the right kind of things can actually bring quite a lot of changes to the business as well. Now, this one I just put in as a little bit of a teaser for anyone who's a publisher who's getting a little bit concerned about where you can go with your cover prices. It looks to me actually there's still quite a long way to go. So if you look along the top, you can see not quite the spectrum you saw earlier in some of the presentations, but something starting from a top-end magazine, which is once a month in the UK at £3.90, coming across the newspaper market and ending up Despite all the changes in digitization, changes in radio, TV, you know what? The biggest selling magazine in the UK is still a TV listings magazine, which is TV Choice, and it's at 38p now. If you compare that with what consumers actually spend their money on, whether it's habitual or a need to, you can see that a packet of cigarettes is £8.34, a coffee is £2.50, a lottery ticket was a £1 and has actually gone to £2. God, would I love every single cover price to double in price. That would be really quite helpful. To 90p, or to a bar of chocolate, 60p. The relativities of our prices to what consumers are actually spending their tight sums each month on is actually quite an important thing for publishers to consider in terms of their elasticities of supply and demand. So in terms of finishing up, kind of where are we in the UK? Yeah, you know what, everybody's working really hard to find what the outcome is, to improve their bottom line, to continue to get investment, to invest in their own businesses going forward. And there would be much, much more consolidation going in future. I mean, whether it will go across the levels in the supply chain like we've seen in the States, or whether it will just be more consolidation at publisher level, it's an inevitability that that's the case. And the question for us is really what the outcome of it is. And I think I remember about maybe 2 or 3 years ago when Dag Rasmussen was up here, and he said, model your business forward at 50% decline and see what it looks like. It was a pretty scary thing. I then did that evening. But the outcome of that was we're still a good business, generating lots of cash and still profitable, with lots of good people and lots of good assets. So use that, and use that as a value to get into diversification. And you know, last year we bought a business which is in marketing services for £15 million. So within the next 12 months, we'll probably get roughly 20–25% of our EBIT coming from businesses other than print magazine, but using those same skill sets. So from my end, the UK is definitely a challenge market. There's lots happening going forward, but there's also a lot of great people with lots of good ideas to continue to invest, to make sure our shareholders are happy, because that's kind of the key thing from our side.